We need to call out our fundamentalists. I know that it's fun to invite the fundamentalists on your show, but you're causing this conflation. You're setting up Matt Dillahunty here to be, this is a representative of atheism. No, Matt Dillahunty doesn't represent me. Matt Dillahunty is a fundamentalist anti-theist. Hey everybody, it's your friend Adam. I should have done this video when this video first came out, but I apologize. I've been busy as hell. I've been working on a bunch of paintings. I'm trying to put together a show. I post more regularly on my personal channel if you want to check it out there. I posted this picture of a painting that I was working on, or this video of a painting that I was working on yesterday. I've entitled it Degenerate Art, a Disney Orgy Princess, because there's a Disney princess orgy. Or did I say that right? Disney princess orgy? There is a Disney princess orgy in the actual painting. So I know I have a lot of religious fans on this channel that want me to become a Christian. And I do. I mean, I have the Christian values, but I'm a bit of a degenerate. So I don't know. I figure fair warning, but I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out over there. And we will get back to this Glen Scrivener versus Matt Dillahunty. They don't put the verses, they put the "and" in, but there was a bit of the verses in here. Glen did an excellent job of getting Dillahunty on his heels a few times. So this video is a must watch. It's doing relatively well here. I see it as 36,000 views, which is great. It totally deserves it. I did some bookmarking here for a few clips. The first half of the debate I was enthralled with. I thought Matt was, or I thought Glen was doing great and Matt was losing the battle. I'll play a couple of those clips here and respond to them. But towards the end, I do think that Matt turned it around. And there's a little bit of this miscommunication. Well, I don't know that they're miscommunicating as much as they're both interested in arguing the scientific truth value of religion from a kind of a historical perspective, and I guess a universal perspective, because they're talking. Glen really believes that God is a being out there in the universe that acts in the ways that are depicted in biblical scholarship. And I don't believe that. Obviously, I'm an atheist, but I do believe in metaphorical truth. I do believe these things are true from an evolutionary perspective. And I go back and forth. I've actually had Glen on my channel. We had a really good discussion. I've also had Justin Brierley on my channel. I had a really nice talk with him. So these guys are true believers. They believe from the theological perspective. I don't necessarily believe that, but I think the arguments from a scientific perspective are in favor of the Christian side. So I keep kind of poking and prodding to get the people who are believers out there to make these better arguments that the secular community really needs to counter in order for them to put forward a viable argument how atheism can deliver us a better world. And that's what they're talking about here. Can atheism deliver us a better world? I don't necessarily believe that it can. And there's a point in here where that I'll respond to where Matt is asked, is there any good reason to believe religions are true? Which I think there is a good reason to believe religions are true, even though they are not true. And that's the whole concept of metaphorical truth. So, and that's one of the things that I've kind of devoted my channel to exploring. I know it's a kind of an untenable position, but as Morpheus would say, it seems that the universe has a sense of irony, because it is very ironic if the things that are true from a evolutionary perspective, from a biological perspective, are not really true from a scientific, objective reality perspective. That is completely ironic, but may actually be the case for the world that we're living in. So this was a fascinating talk. I put a couple of notes together here before I play the clips, because it's a question that I have, I guess, for my audience and for Glen and for maybe Justin as well. I want to know what is wrong with pressing the scientific argument where you have the science on your side. I say, why not press Matt on the enforcement mechanism for secular morality? My argument is without law enforcement, there is no law. So if you have a moral system that has no potential way of enforcing it, do you really have a moral system? The analogy that I would make is if you have laws of the land, but you have no law enforcement, if you have no way to enforce that law, is even having the laws useful? Is there any utility to having laws that we are unable to enforce? So, and secular morality just seems to me a moral system without any teeth. So I know this argument works from a scientific perspective, from an evolutionary perspective, but I'm not sure that it works from a theological perspective because I don't have the background in theology. This might be a good question for Paul Vanderklay, another person on the theological side that I've been pressing. I want these really smarter, very articulate theists. That sounds so bad. That sounds terrible because it sounds like I'm saying theists aren't normally articulate. I don't want to throw shade at the theists. Obviously, you guys know that I'm pretty much on your side. I worry about the downfall of our cultures. At some level, culture has to cohere for both sides of the argument. The scientific side needs a stable, healthy culture so that we can continue our work, our pursuit of knowledge, our pursuit of understanding. And the theological side, well, people in general, even the science side needs meaning in their lives. So without some sort of culture, without a way that we all embed ourselves into a culture that is thriving, healthy, and makes us feel good about ourselves, what do we have? We have the potential downfall of our civilization. So that's something that we're struggling with, I think, now. So the first clip that I have
against the whole room that was very much of a Dawkins style of atheism.
You felt that was the overwhelming kind of feeling in the room was that they were backing that kind of atheist
in that moment,
okay.
that it would be a better thing if religion ceased to exist.
So Glenn is just talking about when he had gone to an atheist conference about 8 years ago, and new atheism. I know some people have a problem with that term, but the revival of antitheism. And I like to make this distinction because I think of myself as an atheist, but I'm definitely not an anti-theist. I'm a pro-Christianity atheist. So while I don't believe in the actual theological stuff, I do believe that it's better for our culture, and it's been honed by the principles of evolution over the centuries.
And then what was interesting is Facebook reminded me, the time hop thing reminds you that, 8 years ago you were in Oxford. And I happened to be in Oxford last year to see a Jordan Peterson talk. And I happened to see a number of people, some prominent atheists from the atheist community, like Cosmic Skeptic was there, and a number of people who were at the debate that I was at 8 years ago. And suddenly they were listening to Jordan Peterson, who's a very different voice, a secular voice still, although he has a much, grander vision for...
That's really all I wanted to point out there is the Jordan Peterson... One of the reasons why I became so fascinated with Jordan Peterson is because I've been trying to have this conversation since 2012. So in 2012, I read that book, The Righteous Mind, and it totally opened my eyes. I read all the books that Jonathan Haidt references in The Righteous Mind. He's got a ton of research that he references in that book, and I started reading papers, and I started reading those books. And I really wanted to have this conversation. I was kind of a vocal anti-theist at the time, and I realized that the anti-theists were completely getting it wrong. They were not having the conversation that they should be having. Actually, I don't know that I was ever really a vocal anti-theist as much as like making videos and stuff like that, but I was definitely watching Thunderfoot videos, and I thought beating up on the theist was fun to do. I wasn't a believer at the time. I was an atheist, but I didn't really have any respect for religion in the way that I have grown to respect religion. So I wasn't making videos at that time, but I still was leaning towards team antitheism. 2012 rolls around. I realized, wow, we have this completely wrong. On the science, we have it wrong. And I realized there was a lot of hypocrisy going on in that community. I wanted to point it out. I did in the normal way people do those kinds of things. Like I argue with people on the internet because that's fun and something that I like to do anyway. So, but it took me a long time to get any kind of recognition. Well, I've never got any kind of recognition for having this conversation. I kind of realized Jordan Peterson was lighting up this conversation that I wanted to have since 2012. And I thought, wow, this is great. Maybe I can finally get in on this conversation, which I kind of have. So Glenn even cites he doesn't cite me by name, but he does cite our discussions in this video. So hopefully I'm making some kind of headway in changing this conversation, making it a more productive thing. So I think I'll skip my other. He does bring up the morality binds and blinds thing, which is really cool. Calls out to Jonathan Haidt. I'll just play it.
It's human nature. I think someone like Jonathan Haidt would say in The Righteous Mind that we all orbit around these little totem poles of highest value.
And I'm curious if I'm the one that introduced Glenn to Haidt. I don't know. I'd have to go back and listen to our conversation. I'll link that in the description below too.
You know, and those totem poles bind and blind. They bind together communities, but they blind us against what the other communities are saying. And therefore... And
Glenn actually told me too that he asked Matt Dillahunty after the show, after this interview, if he had read Jonathan Haidt, and Matt Dillahunty has not read Jonathan Haidt. So we know I've turned many anti-theists on to Jonathan Haidt, and they don't take it seriously. They find ways around this being untrue because they're so embedded into the anti-theist community that it's really, I mean, it is their community. You're asking them to leave their church, which all the analogies that they hate because they hate to be defined as religious hold true. They're still carrying that religious psychology in their heads, even though they claim to be anti-religious, which is why they get so triggered by it. But you can't really have these reasonable conversations. It's funny, I do feel you're closer to having the reasonable conversations with the theist side, even though this conversation is kind of a testament to the fact that they still want to fight over the validity of Scripture, the validity of God being there, some interdimensional being that has a say in our lives, the idea of heaven and hell, those kinds of things. They still want to argue over whether or not those things are real. I think they should just take the position that those things are real, but we cannot prove them, and therefore take them off the table and make the arguments that they can make where they can destroy the atheist community. This debate, can atheism deliver a better world? There's so many arguments that you can make on the scientific side, and Glenn does. This is a stellar performance by Glenn. I don't want to throw Glenn under the bus here. He does. Matt Dillahunty pulls out like the one study that you can pull out that shows secular humanism is this bastion of great society building, and Glenn just immediately debunks it and asks Dillahunty, "Why are you hanging on to this one study that's got a bunch of cherry-picked data in it from 100 years ago?" And Dillahunty doesn't really have an answer. But Dillahunty isn't really digging into the scientific aspect. It's funny that Dillahunty wants to stand under the banner of science, but he doesn't necessarily even know the science well. Like he's looked at one research paper and he's done because all the other research is against him.
An atheist community can be just as religious in that sense as a Christian community, a Muslim community, a Buddhist community, because we all have these highest ideals. We're all involved in motivated reasoning. We all have our in-group.
Dillahunty is nodding along for those of you who are just listening, so maybe we're making some headway.
We all have our out group.
I tried to set up a debate with Dillahunty. I told him I would fly out to Texas and debate him face to face, and he blocked me. I'm sure he blocked me because Rationality Rules started this crazy rumor about me. I don't want to spread the rumor, but Rationality Rules is not rational and not honest.
And we can all engage in behavior that is more or less tolerant of one another. And then the question becomes, well, how do we relate towards one another? And the one thing that then rules out is we can't then have an irreligious solution to the problem of these different communities.
Yeah. So it's a great point that he makes. He basically says the exact same thing I'm saying, that this religious psychology is in there, and you don't get to pull it out because you leave religion. What happens is you don't have a coherent way to organize that religious psychology without religion. Now, secular humanism tries to do that, but as I said before, they strip out the enforcement mechanism, because God is the enforcement mechanism, both on the positive side and on the punishment side, because there is if you don't act ethically, there will be consequences. Secular humanism doesn't have that. And you can make an argument that all of the atrocities that have been perpetrated in secular nations, the Soviet Union, are done because they have a moral system without any teeth. You can do heinous things and there's no accountability. They also do it on the reward side and the prestige side, in that they have the avatar of Jesus, which is the thing that you want to aspire to. You want to also be forgiving. So you're less likely to engage in those heinous acts, because if someone wrongs you, whether it be accidentally or on purpose, you're more likely to forgive them and move on with your life than to lose time and energy in some retributive retribution-based battle. So I'll go to the last one here, which is there a good reason to believe religions are true? Now, I don't think this is how Matt Dillahunty intended this to be, but the wording here is interesting, because he's asking, is there any good reason to believe religions are true? Now, I know that he means, is there any good reason to believe that they're scientifically true? But I am making the argument here that there is a good reason to believe that they're true, even though they aren't true. There's a reason to believe because when we embed ourselves in these communities where we believe these things, it's really better for us health-wise. And Glen lays a lot of the studies out in this talk, where he talks about how you'll be healthier, happier, and you can even make an argument freer, because I believe that the reason why liberal democracies have been allowed to thrive is because people are keeping themselves in check. We have a situation now in China where this state is forced to keep people in check. It's basically an atheist society where everyone is being monitored and listened to. If we have God monitoring and listening to us, and it keeps people in line, to a certain extent, that's less. There doesn't need to be as much external monitoring from the state. That's my argument. You can argue against it. Please do argue against it. I want the best ideas. That's what I'm ultimately after. So we'll just listen to the last clip, and that's it.
Different communities.
Yeah. Is that a fair comment, though, that atheism in that sense is quite religious when it gets its expression in these ways, Matt?
So I'm always going to...
Triggered. Is atheism... I really wish that people would start, especially Justin, who has a huge platform like this. He has an opportunity here to really hammer home the distinction between atheist and anti-theist, because I believe the atheist numbers, the pro-religion atheist numbers are strong, Justin. You just need to separate out the anti-theists. We need to call out our fundamentalists. I know that it's fun to invite the fundamentalists on your show, but you're causing this conflation. You're setting up Matt Dillahunty here to be this is a representative of atheism. No, Matt Dillahunty doesn't represent me. Matt Dillahunty is a fundamentalist anti-theist. He believes the world would be a better place without religion. He's pimping his own religion, which is secular humanism. There's about 400,000 secular humanists in the world. I think there's 3 billion Christians. Okay, so it's not successful. It's a fringe, very fringe moral system. Very fringe, very leftist. Okay, it doesn't speak for atheists.
I'm going to push back on this atheism thing, but just as far as the label. But yes, speaking kind of colloquially, of course it can be like that because there are humans involved, and this is what humans do. My only concern with religions at all is there any good reason to believe they're true?
See, he says, is there any good reason to believe they're true? There is a good reason to believe they're true. It creates a society that coheres. I know Matt Dillahunty has huge problems with the Authority Foundation. If you listen to my channel for any length of time, you know I'm a huge moral foundations theory guy. I believe Jonathan Haidt has come up with an idea to conceptualize how morality works and to study it through moral foundations theory. There's a moral foundation called the Authority Subversion Foundation. This evolved in humans so that we could structure our tribes in hierarchical order that are based on prestige hierarchy. So the people who are the most competent are at the height of the hierarchy. It allows us to face the world as a team. So Matt Dillahunty does not like that system because he's basically on the left. The left all have a problem with authority. They want to see things done more democratically, and there's good reasons for that, and there's good reasons for structuring things hierarchically based on authority granted by prestige, by competence. So the Dillahunty, the fact that he doesn't like authority, the fact that he thinks authority is misplaced, and he brings that up many times here in this talk, does not like the idea of God watching you and keeping you in line. That bugs him, especially if it's a God that isn't really there. That offends his sensibilities. Therefore, it's really hard to have this conversation with him because there is kind of a Sophie's Choice thing here. There is a how important is not falling into the Soviet Union type situation where millions of people are going to be murdered versus believing untrue things. So while I wish the world could be a place where everybody believes only true things, only factually correct things, religions evolved to serve a tangible purpose, a biological purpose that aid us in staving off the next genocide. I know I'm going to get people in the comment section going crazy about it. Are you kidding? Religion causes genocides. That's the debate. That really is the debate. So, well, I've drone on long enough in this video. I wanted to give a response. People were asking me about it, and there you go. There's my response. Once again, you can check out my personal channel if you're interested in what I'm doing. And obviously, Sitch and I have a live stream today on Sitch's PSA Sitch on Daily is a channel. So I'll go ahead and leave it there, and we'll see you in the next video.
Well, first of all, if you don't have a purpose, it isn't that your life becomes neutral in a meaningless sense. It's that your life becomes characterized by unbearable suffering. Because the baseline condition of life is something like unbearable suffering.